of course, you've got another issue, which is the school bus service. What service did you have? How's it changed?
Yep, so we are, for a little bit of context, we are around about 45 kilometres inland from Napier. No other schools out here. And that is relatively close to where we live. It's about 6 kilometres away. And we've always had a bus that comes past our gateway for 60 odd years. And that's recently been axed, which is obviously affecting us, along with lots of other rural school bus cuts around the country.
I'm fascinated about the history of Riverside Community Farm. What can you tell us about it?
Well, it's evolved a lot. It's an intentional community, started, as you said, during the Second World War by conscientious objectors to compulsory military conscription during the Second World War. This Methodist group decided or believed that, following the teachings of Christ, that fighting and killing was against their principles.
G'day everyone, welcome into another edition of the Rex Daily Podcast. Now, coming up for you on the show today, we've got Sally Newall joining us. Now, Sally is from the Hawke's Bay. She's going to be talking about the enormous cost of the cuts that we're seeing around the country at the moment to rural school bus services. It's causing major issues out there. So Sally Newall to talk us through that. Plus, we're going to be talking with a guy called Tristan Vincent as well. He is the farm manager at a place called Riverside Community Farm. It's up at the top of the South Island. And the story really is about the pacifist origins during World War II to what they produce now on the farm. A community farm, interesting. We can hear all about that with Tristan Vincent. So that's all coming up for you on the show today. Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Our next guest on the program is Sally Newall, who is a qualified veterinarian and a bull beef farmer and parent as well in the Hawke's Bay. Recently, she posted on social media about the loss of their primary school rural bus service and the flow-on effects, things like overbooked boarding schools, the effects on running the farm, day-to-day life, etc. She had a lot of feedback on that as well, so we thought it's an important issue to keep highlighting here on the program. Sally, it's lovely to have you on. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much for having me on.
No worries at all. Firstly, though, you're in the Hawke's Bay, so I suspect there's been damage of sorts, potentially, given the rather crappy weather that's hit the North Island in the last couple of days.
Yeah, we had mainly wind affected us on Sunday night. So we've had a lot of trees down, power lines down. We've still got no power, but we're used to that after the cyclone. And but we're not able to reach. We have 2 small farms, and at the moment we're not able to reach our other farm because there's trees and power lines down on the road still. So yeah, causing a little bit of mayhem, but that's okay.
I think they were talking on the news about the fact that these severe weather events, there's been already, I think, just as many as we had last year in total already for 2026. It's crazy.
Yeah, and we're actually in the process of putting solar up at the moment. I can see the guys out there working on the solar panels on my new shed, but they weren't quite up in time for this storm. So it's quite ironic. We sort of sit looking at our shiny new solar panels that aren't hooked up yet while we have no power in the house. So, but we're certainly working on that because, I mean, through winter here, like lots of rural places around New Zealand, power cuts are just a regular thing out here. We have lots of very vulnerable power lines and trees come down in a bit of wind and then we have no power for sometimes a few days. So yeah, we're definitely working on that and trying to make ourselves effectively off grid so we don't have to rely on that power supply.
Yeah, and that is a great idea to do. I think a lot more people will be doing that as well, but commiserations on that. But of course you've got another issue, which is, as I mentioned, the school bus service. What service did you have? How's it changed?
Yep, so we are, for a little bit of context, we are around about 45 kilometres inland from Napier is our closest town. No other schools out here. So we have 1 primary school that goes through to intermediate, and that is relatively close to where we live. It's about 6 kilometres away from our farm. And so that school actually has quite a wide catchment. We had another school that was further more remote in Puketitri that shut around about 20 years ago, probably now. And then we had another school that was closer to town, and that closed around about 10 to 15 years ago. And the government at that time put funds into our school to put a new classroom on to take those children from those two wider areas to come to our school in Motueka. And we've always had a bus that comes past our gateway. So the bus has always, for 60 odd years, the bus has always come down our road, always collected children from our farm here. And that's recently been axed, which is obviously affecting us fairly heavily, along with lots of other rural school bus cuts around the country, because this has been not a new thing. This has been going on for a little while.
What's the reason that you were given in terms of the axing of the service?
So for our bus on our road, we have a really changeable population on our road. We've got a lot of dairy farms down our road, which does affect things because families come and go quite frequently, especially around Gypsy Day. You might lose 6 kids and end up with workers on the farm that have no children for a period of time. So yeah, very, very changeable role on our road. And so what happened was they have a cut-off, which I'm sure you know, which is 4 children have to be getting on at the last bus stop. So temporarily, at the moment, it was very temporary for around about a month. We only had 3 children, and then that was due to go back up to 4 children as of February. But they cut our bus run because we were down to 3 children. And that has just ended. It just has huge follow-on effects. So one of the things that's happened is our tenants actually that live on our other farm, their daughter, they had no way of getting their daughter to school without a bus because they both work in town. One's a nurse, one's a fencer, and they work full-time in town. So they have no way of getting her to school. So she's a young girl sitting at home doing homeschool now because of that. So, and we've also lost another family that have decided to move to town because it's just got too hard living out here without a rural bus. It has really severe effects on families. And I think these cuts are made far too easily and they're far too inflexible. Very short amount of notice given. And the rules are rules, I get that, but perhaps the rules need looking at. Because I think there should this whole thing about there being 4 children at the end of the road, and if there's not 4 children getting on that bus, it gets axed. Well, maybe that's the issue. Maybe there needs to be more flexibility around that from the policymakers. You know,
what an absolute shocker that is. There's not 4, there's 3. Therefore, we have to, and in a month there's going to be 4 anyway. So, could you make a compromise or something? We do love a rule in New Zealand, that is for sure. Bloody sticklers with them as well. It's very frustrating. So what about the secondary school bus service? Does that have is that any better or?
We have no secondary school bus service now. So there used to be a bus that came around about halfway to Motueka. So you could drive sort of 25 minutes down the road and you could put your kids on a bus and that would take them to all the local secondary schools in town. It was a bit of a process, like the kids had to hop on and off different buses to get to the school they were going to. But there was a service there and that was axed a few years ago. So there's no option now. So our situation is we're pretty lucky. We've been here for almost 20 years. So as soon as I had kids, I knew I had to get them on the hostel list. And so I put them on the hostel list. And we've been lucky that our oldest boy has been able to get into Napier Boys Hostel. It was very, very competitive to get in there. I think when he's year 10 now, when he went for interview, I believe there are around 300 boys being interviewed for about 80 places in the hostel for year 9s. So incredibly competitive to get in, and there's no guarantee you'll get in. And he had been on that list since he was a baby, and his dad went to Napier Boys. So for workers coming into the district, happens all the time, especially with dairy farm workers in our district coming in. They have kids that are high school age, sort of thinking, oh, this is fine, we'll be able to get them on a bus or we'll be able to get them into the hostel. And suddenly they find they can't. And there's people on our bus run that's been cut. They are actually having to send their children over to Wanganui to board in Wanganui because they can't get them into boarding schools here and there's no bus service. So it's going to have a real flow-on effect. Like, this is only getting worse and worse is my concern. And how we attract tenants in our district, how we attract workers onto our farms, how this will affect farm values. Like, at the end of the day, if you are living in an area that has no amenities, no ability to get kids to school for an education, ultimately they're going to go to an area that's better serviced or closer to town, so they don't have to deal with this. So it will affect farm values. So while I'm banging a drum about what's happening to us, I'm actually much bigger picture thinking, what's going on here? Why is no one thinking about the bigger picture of how this is going to affect rural communities? It's really bad news for rural communities how the Ministry of Education is just cutting rural bus services across the country.
Yeah, it's a cascading effect, as you've outlined very, very articulately there, Sally. So what feedback have you had from other people in not only your district, but around other parts of the country as well in relation to this issue?
Lots of feedback, which has been interesting in itself. So we've got a social media page where I share stuff about our farm life, and incredible the comments, the feedback, the interaction with my few posts on the subject have been, which just shows how severely people are affected by this on a day-to-day basis and how strongly they feel about it. One interesting thing that I've noticed is there is a bit of apathy around it, and I think that's because it's been going on for so long, and it's like death by 1,000 paper cuts. And even when I've gone to talk to the ministry about this, the consensus from other people has been, oh, look, this has been going on for ages. What can you do? And well, what you can do is you can stand up and you can fight it, and you can try and get involved at a policy level if that's what you need to do. But if we don't fight this thing, we're not going to get anywhere. And I think they're able to do these cuts over time because if they do it wide enough across enough rural districts, everyone just goes, oh, it's happening across the country. What can you do? So this is sort of my battleground where I'm like, fundamentally, what they're doing is wrong. When you've got a rural economy and you've got our Prime Minister standing up last week at National Lamb Day at Parliament and saying the rural economy the rural New Zealand is powering the New Zealand economy. How can you justify cutting all our rural bus runs and making it really hard for us to get an education for our kids? Like, the two things don't line up to me, and actions speak louder than words. And I just think people need to be held account to this, and whether that's high up rather than at a school level, that's fine. But we need to do something about this.
Yeah, I think you raise a really good point as well. It's election year. It's lip service. I wouldn't really hold too much weight on what politicians say, but what in terms of dealings, have you had with those in the corridors of power, Sally?
So I've been I was actually in Wellington last week. I went down for a rural women's event called Activator, which is supporting rural women in business. So I went down there talking about my new on-farm learning business up here, but met quite a few really interesting people who are in the policy space down there. So I'm certainly going to get involved with that, especially through rural women. They've been very keen to get someone else on the ground who's got real world experience and is being affected by these changes to sort of step into that space and help give them some on the ground grassroots feedback, I suppose, is the intention of that. Look, unanimously, people are supportive. People kind of hold their heads in their hand and go, oh, this is terrible, what's happening? But no one's really willing to take responsibility for actually stepping into that space and making any change, I find, like, especially when you're talking about MPs. They all have to toe the line. So it's I guess, kind of trying to find that person that has the power and is also interested enough to assist with getting some real change made at a higher up level will be the key thing.
Any names come to mind? Anyone who's expressed some sort of interest?
Our local MP has been involved, so Katie Nimmin has been involved. I personally haven't dealt with Katie yet, but I will be speaking to her shortly. But I know she is largely supportive, but again, Katie has to toe the line. And and if any listeners out there have contacts that can send them my way, I'm certainly I've got a meeting with two people from Transport and Ministry of Education later this morning. So I'm all ears to any useful contacts that can be supportive of trying to get some real change across the country. Yeah.
It's an incredible situation, really. Where do you go from here? Well, no, actually, better question is, do you have any faith that any of this will actually bear fruit?
I think if you could get hold of someone with a little bit of power, a little bit higher up in the ministry that actually came out to our rural district and saw how farms operate and came and saw the bus stops that they're trying to cut and actually discussed what our challenges are and what we're frustrated about, because one of the biggest barriers is lack of communication. So like I sent 5 emails over the summer holidays trying to get some answers to my questions around our bus run, and it was just been stonewalled. So I've been persistent with that, and I'm now starting to get somewhere, but it's really, really hard. And I do feel like their first line of defense is to just ignore, and that shouldn't be the way. So no, I certainly feel like I'm starting to make steady progress. Whether that'll have any effect with our local bus run or not, I don't know. But hopefully, I can get involved at a slightly higher level to help get some common sense involved around the decision making at a higher level. One of the really sort of common sense grassroots things that I think is just bonkers is that we used to be able to pay to extend our bus runs. So if we had someone that lived 10k past the end of the last bus stop where there were 4 kids, that family could choose if they wanted to pay for the ministry bus to drive up and pick their kids up, which was quite expensive, but some families did it because it meant that the wife could go to work, it meant that both of them could be running the business, it gave them flexibility in their everyday life. And we're not allowed to do that anymore. So where has that come from? Why has that come in? And from the people I've been talking to, that seems to be a very local thing. So in some areas, they are still allowed to pay to extend the bus run. In our area, we're not. And my understanding of that is that it's due to the bus company. So I think that unfortunately, the bus companies manage to get their hands on these ministry contracts, and then they can do with those bus runs what they please. And they can find ways to cut them. If they suddenly get the bus contract and they decide that there's a lot of wear and tear on our buses from going on these rural roads, maybe we don't actually want that rural run, they find ways to cut the rural run. And they've done that to us. And it's completely unfair, completely unjust. And the ministry just washes their hands of it and says the bus company, it's up to the bus companies. And that needs to change. That's ridiculous. Like if they're taking on a ministry contract, there should be rules around what they're expected to provide for rural communities. They shouldn't just be able to cut us out.
Yeah, so those contracts need looking at. They need to be tightened up. That seems to be one of the that there is probably one of the fundamental issues.
Yeah, 100%. Because I get it. If the rule is 4 kids, the rule is 4 kids. I do understand that. I'm not saying we're special and we should be treated any differently. But I would happily pay for that bus to come to our driveway and pick up my child so that I can work as a vet, so that I can help run the business, so that I'm not tied to having to be the transport to get him to school twice a day. You can probably hear him in the background here because he's sitting next to me because he's not at school this morning because I had this interview to do, so I couldn't get him to school. It's that silly. So this is what it comes down to. You're limiting the ability of people to work. We want to work. We're in rural communities. We're all workers. And you're actually limiting our ability to be contributing members of society because we're a taxi service now. And I just think that's absolutely mad.
Yeah, no, it fundamentally is insane. And also, your citizens of this country, I thought one of the key rights of the citizen was education.
Yeah, and it's just, I think one of the key differences that I do have to keep explaining to people, because people that live in town don't necessarily understand what the differences are. And when you're in town, I get it, not everyone has a free school bus, but you have options. You have ways of your kids getting to school, not necessarily the school you want your kid to go to, but there will be a local school, and there will normally be a easy way that child can get to school, whether it's riding their bike on a bike path, whether it's walking on a footpath, whether it's catching a bus. There are options. Out here, we don't have any options. If I was to work in town as a vet, I would have to make sure I was here at 8 o'clock in the morning to get my child to school by 9 o'clock. And then I'd have to be back here, driving back from town at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to make sure that I picked him up from school. Like, how do I find an employer that's going to let me do that? So it's just the distances that we're talking about and the lack of options is what makes it really different from what people face in town. And 100% they have challenges in town, but there are unique differences with rural communities that are just being completely overlooked at the moment. And the lack of understanding and the lack of willingness to even talk about it is really frustrating.
I can imagine. So you're saying in your case, it's an hour each way?
from where I was working as a vet in Hastings, it takes me an hour from home to get to work at the clinic. Yeah.
Wow. Incredible.
So logistics, but we're very close to the school, really. We're only 6K from the school. I'm not saying we're massively isolated from the school, but the logistics of how you get your child that 6K when you're meant to be, when you're trying to work in town, how do you do that?
Unbelievable. So I've read a story recently, and it was in the Post, and it was about some Manawatu parents trying to launch their own bus service to ensure that their kids can get to school from their rural areas, because in Palmy North, a lot of those rural routes, as much as you're facing the Hawke's Bay, have been cancelled as well. That's been an ongoing saga. We've spoken about this on the program before. I'm not sure where they got to on that particular one, but yeah, as you say, surely there's provision for, I guess it comes back to those contracts, doesn't it, at the end of the day? So they need to be tightened up. But have you thought of anything along those lines, launching your own bus service? I'm sure you've looked into it. You probably looked into everything.
How can you tell? We certainly have. Very expensive. So in relation to a bus that's already in the district and is 6K away, coming down our road to pick our kids up, the driver lives in the district, the bus is already in the district. That is the cheapest way to pick our children up. And we're very happy to pay for that if we have to for a year or two until our numbers go up. If you're not allowed to do that, which we're not allowed to do that by our current bus company, you then have to look at funding your own bus. And that has a lot of challenges around it, especially when you only have a relatively small number of families living on the affected bus runs, with, as I say, a lot of families that come and go. So how you even have consistency in that to pay your bus driver, to pay for the fuel, to get enough money together to actually keep a consistent bus run is really, really challenging when you're talking about a small number of families. It would be really great. I know some schools are really supportive and do fundraisers. There's lots of rural schools that are forced to do that. And that would be fantastic. That's not currently happening with our school. It's very much the affected parents, unfortunately, that are having to try and battle this, which is a real shame. But hopefully we might be able to find a way around it. But fundamentally, we shouldn't have to. Like this, I don't believe it's the ministry line that a school bus is a privilege, not a right. And I don't agree with that. I actually think if you want to, especially our current Prime Minister saying he wants to get attendance rates up to 80% by 2030, and then he cuts all our rural school bus runs. And our kids love going to school. Ted loves going to school. He actually does really well at school. I want him to be at school, but you're putting a barrier there to getting my child to school. So make that make sense. Like, that's what I mean. Actions speak louder than words, and none of it makes sense.
Yeah, education, rural, economic performance, etc., backbone of the economy, all these sorts of things. Again, I'll say platitudes, really, because as you say, actions speak louder than words, and at the moment, the actions are not matching up with those sentiments, plain and simple.
Yeah, it's penny pinching. I get it. They're trying to go around cutting costs and generating more funds to do other stuff with. I get it. But at the end of the day, like, have some respect for your rural communities that you're calling the backbone of New Zealand. And I think just last week they were saying 4 billion in sheep sales alone over the last year, and you're not willing to use any of that revenue to get your rural kids to school. That just it appalls me, frankly.
And so it should as well. Your website, Kiwi Country Kids, you've got strong social media presence as well. I'm sure you're raising the issue. As you said, you've had a lot of feedback on it and things like that. So those channels, if people want to find you and what you do, not only on this issue, but, widely, more broadly as well, where can you point people toward?
Yeah, so we're very active on social media. Instagram and Facebook are probably our biggest things. Daily posting on there with all our videos from the farm. And this year I'm opening a facility for on-farm learning. So we'll be getting kids out here and teaching them all about farming, and general public and tourists, and hopefully just spreading the good word about farming. So we've got a very basic website up and running that will get a little bit more interesting over this year. But Facebook and Instagram are our big things. So yeah, definitely give us a follow on there.
And that's under the banner Kiwi Country Kids, right?
Yeah. Kiwi Country Kids Official on Facebook and Instagram, I think, is the line. But yeah, our brand is Kiwi Country Kids.
And Farmer Time for Schools, right? That's the initiative that you're talking about there?
No, so I am involved with Farmer Time for Schools, but that's actually separate.
Okay.
Yep. So I've been a farmer for Farmer Time for Schools. I was involved with a pilot, and then I was re-involved with it last year. And but that is a separate initiative. So Marie Burke does a great job of running that, and I'm actually going up to the Farming Expo this week to be on a panel with her talking about getting kids involved in farming. So yeah, really enjoyed that. But this is kind of an extension of that, because actually my Farmer Time class, which are from Tiawa Primary School in Napier, they're a really cool class of kids. They came out to the farm last August, and they were kind of my guinea pigs to see, right, is this going to be a goer? Am I going to enjoy this? And it was fantastic. And they really enjoyed it. And I really enjoyed it. And that gave me the kicker to just, right, let's get on and start this. So, yeah, so new shed going up at the moment. And we'll have areas for calf rearing, milking a house cow, doing fecal egg counts, basically sort of sharing with the kids and the general public everything that we do on the farm, and just trying to get a bit of positive education out there about all the good stuff that happens on farms.
Well, they can't get to school to get it, so good on you for doing it.
Yeah, homeschooling too, maybe. Yeah.
Well, as you say, for every probably 1,000 people that comment on your various social media accounts, there might be one that will actually do something about it, so keep up the good work. It's been really good to talk with you. It's a hell of an issue. And, you say the word or the phrase, bus services, and, it doesn't really generate that much sort of general interest. But when you delve into, as you say, the flow-on effects and what that actually means for the education of our kids out there in the rural sector, it is a very big issue. So good on you for highlighting it. We'll be in touch again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate the chat and drawing any attention to it. I know it's sometimes a bit of a dry topic, but as you say, it really does affect people's lives in rural districts. So really appreciate it.
Okay, so there's a Riverside Community Farm, or a place called Riverside Community Farm. It's near Motueka in Tasman. It was started by Methodist pacifists back in the World War II era, and it's evolved into a self-supported community. It's one of the remaining raw milk farm gate suppliers in the South Island, 200 hectares of beef and dairy farm, as well as an orchard. They've got a vegetable garden as well. And the farm manager and former board chair, Tristan Vincent, joins us now from this rather idyllic spot on the Motueka River to talk about this. Nice to have you on. How are you?
Thank you, Dom. I'm great. How are you?
I'm not too bad at all. I'm fascinated about the history of Riverside Community Farm. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, it's evolved a lot. It's an intentional community. Started, as you said, during the Second World War by conscientious objectors to compulsory military conscription during the Second World War. This Methodist group decided or believed that, following the teachers of Christ, that fighting and killing was against their principles. So they stood up to the conscription and said no, they wouldn't do that. And because of that, they were sent to work camps during the wartime. The men were. And their families gathered on this piece of land, which became Riverside Community. They decided to live their ideals of shared resources rather than competition as a way of life. And it's developed from there over many, many years and many changes.
So it was the hippies before the hippies, Tristan.
Oh, yeah, they weren't hippies in those days. Methodists are very hard-working people, 7 days a week, 6 days a week, and then church on the Sunday. Wasn't hippies. That did, of course, happen later in the 70s. It did turn into the hippie era, and there was a large influx of those influences in the 70s and 80s. And then, what's happened since then in the 90s, 2000s? There's an interesting journey of what today an intentional community is. And it's become more centered around, the shared values and the sharing. We share income, which is the major part of what makes it unique here at Riverside. So we're supporting each other and trying to get away from a competitive way of living, which we believe in the end leads to war, but also to the destruction of a war against nature, because if you're competing, then you have to get as much as you can for yourself, otherwise someone else is going to get it. And that leads to someone's going to be paying. And in the end, at this day and age, it's the nature which is paying, and it's the earth which is being competed against. And that really is something we're trying to move away from through farming regeneratively and through sharing.
All right, I want to get into a bit of that, more of that stuff shortly. But in the first instance, that very first community around the Second World War time, what can you tell us about that, what they got up to, what the size of that original community was?
Yeah, so that was my grandfather's, my grandfather was one of these founding members 3 generations ago. So the size of the community was about 30 adult members, 30 to 40 at that time. And there were people who came in who didn't have to go to fight. Of course, the older and the younger and people infirm, and they all lived here on this land. It started with a 20-acre block, which we call the home orchard and a homestead. And over the years, through a lot of hard work, it was built up to what today is 200 hectares of farmland in the Motueka Valley.
Nice spot. And from there, I guess from that original settlement, is it still Methodist in nature?
No. So what happened was during the 60s, there was no new members coming in, so membership dropped. And there were a big number of members who wanted to come, but they didn't believe in having to be part of the church, in members of the church to be members. And so at this time, that requirement to be a member of the church was dropped from the community. And then there was a big influx of new members at that time. There was also some members left because they were religious and because that was their belief at this time. So there was a big change in the orientation of the community during the early 60s.
Right. And obviously, has it been a continuous thing? Has it ever not been farmed, this particular land, or has it always been farmed and just you've added acres as time's gone on?
Well, in the early days, it was scrub and pine. A lot of it wasn't really farm at that time. There's a lot of pine in this area and a lot of just scrub land, and it was bought at like $50 an acre. So at those times, and there was a huge amount of work gone into clearing it and turning it into farmland. So it wasn't always farmed. But then the flats, which is now the dairy farm, which has actually always been dairy, was farmed. Yeah.
So how big is the community now?
So we're about 200 hectares, and that's the size of the land. There's 25 houses here. And we did have about 40 adult members at the highest numbers. Today it's dropped a bit again. I think we're around about 30 at the moment, and families. But we also rent some of the housing out because it's not all filled up with membership. So there's a lot of people who live here and are associated with the community who are not actually members as such. So there's always a lot more people here. It's like about 80 people. 80
Oh, wow.
100.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how does it work in practice? What's the day-to-day, as it were, and how the resources are shared?
Yeah. Day-to-day is most of us work on site. Like I'm the farm manager, and I'll often start the day at 6 doing moping, normal sort of work. But because we're a group and we share the work as well, I only have to do that 4 days a week. I'm not doing this 7 days a week like a lot of farmers will be doing. On the other 3 days, 2-day weekend, if there's a farmer, that's something pretty special rather than a 2-day weekend. So I've got support, and I've got people here working with me. You also hire people if we need them. We have weekly meetings. So on a Tuesday night, we will have a meeting and we decide a lot of stuff around business, but also just around social, because it's all a bit mixed up because it's social and business together. So it's quite complicated. It's a bit like a very big family, which there's always drama somewhere. So that not always easy. Yeah.
Oh, I can imagine.
Yeah, that's right. It's not an easy way of life, but it has its benefits as well. There is some sort of freedom in that you're not only responsible for yourself, you're also responsible for others. You're also supported by others and we're supporting others. Yeah.
It is interesting. There is a growth in people. I think it's post-COVID, really. For argument's sake, let's say it is, and people wanting to, I don't know, look at this type of, maybe not that exact way of life, but certainly connecting more with nature, I suppose, in the wake of everything and the way that the world's sort of carrying on at the moment. I don't know. Have you got more interest and more people interested in what you're doing and that sort of thing?
I think there is interest, and it's more though towards the sort of eco-village style of community where there's a lot more independence. So we have a probational membership of 2 years, which a lot of people then try out, but after that, becoming a full member seems to be restrictive for a lot of people on their way of life. And we are adapting to that as well. And this time of age, we are adapting to a more individual economic freedom. So originally it was that when you joined and became a member that we pulled all assets. So any money you had would be called you and became part of the community money. And it was about 30 years ago now that we changed that to being that you share income, but we don't share what you can, like inheritances and assets and money which you have been paying. That just remains yours, or you can pass it on to your children or do something else with it. But that when you're here, that you don't use it, so that we're on equal footing and they're living here.
Right. Okay. So when you're talking about full membership, people have to buy into that whole kind of ethos, if you like.
Yeah, although, I mean, full membership today doesn't really change anything. You can leave anytime you want. And because we no longer pool assets, there's no real change from being the probational membership. It's more that those 2 years you get to see how it is and see how you fit. It's more a social thing, if you're going to fit with these people or not. And we get to decide as a group by consensus if we want to take members on, and they get to decide if they want to stay at that 2 year point.
Do you... what sort of pushback do you have against this? So I imagine you've had all sorts of criticisms and stuff over the decades, and you've been involved. Say your grandfather was involved. It's just fascinating to me. What do people say when they know that you exist and come across it, or is it not widely known? I don't know. You tell me. What's the perception of it from people that don't know what it's about?
Well, being pacifist and the anti-military conscription thing, especially in the early days, was a huge social, rejected socially, because, I mean, obviously, New Zealand had its heart in the Second World War, and we're part of that and everything which happened, and we lost people, and so not being part of that was difficult socially. Also in military, with the neighbours for many years, but this is also a very long time ago now, and the views have changed, and people understand that social conscience, which people can choose. I mean, it is a choice which we have socially to choose if we're going to participate in something we don't believe in or not. And that's pretty much accepted, I think, by most people, that's an okay thing to choose. And so the pushback, I don't know, most people don't really have such conception of what it is and how it is to live here. It looks like paradise, and we get here, we come here, we get a house, and we work with other people. There's a lot of interaction. There's sort of like this, we've got grandparents and parents and children, sort of, there's this more family oriented. It's very nice place to bring up children. There's lots of support, and we don't have fences. We don't have our own, it's just like, it's not exclusive. There's no exclusivity here. And for the children, to have 200 hectares to play in, it's such a playground. I mean, I grew up here as well. It's so fantastic just to be able to have that freedom and a big bunch of children. And where we go to the local schools and integrate in that way. The pushback, is not so obvious these days.
Which makes sense. And as you say, it's a choice. So you mentioned sharing income, and that's obviously off the produce that comes from the farm. So what is it that you guys produce primarily?
So the model actually we're running is we're a charitable trust, and mainly we are dairy farmers. So we run dairy. The orchards in the early days we also were in apple orcharding, but we had our own pack house, but that over the years has faded, and we no longer are commercially commercial apple orchards, mainly because of the environmental footprint which they have. It's very difficult. We tried it doing organically, but that was, it worked for a while, but it wasn't really economic at that time when we did that. The dairy farming is the main sort of income. And beef. So beef and dairy, which are both doing well the last few years. At the moment, they're both doing well, which is nice for a change.
Yeah, very, very much so. Yeah, you've got a raw milk vending machine. Is that a big part of the business in terms of the volume and the economics of it?
Yeah, so the raw milk vending machine is great. We've been doing that since about 2015, and since it's been so possible to do that here. That's so the ethos of that is being able to direct supply to local customers, and that's something we do also with our organic garden produce, and we have a cafe here on site. So it's just building up a name and connection with the people who live near to us and supplying them or up to the peak ambition and all that. Let's have a lot of peak. Is something which is part of it, and rather than exporting the milk to China, we would love to supply the locals, which we do through the vending machine, which is a farm gate vending machine here on the main road on site, which we supply with milk every day, and the customers come with their bottles and fill them up, and they can reuse them, or they buy a bottle from us, get one and fill it up. So it's got I think a very low carbon footprint doing this direct sort of supply. As in how much of it is, it's probably 10% of our milk, so it's not an enormous amount because we don't deliver, and it's just people who come past and who are here. That economically, it definitely makes a difference because we get the product which the customer's paying for a product instead of, as most farmers get, we think $10 milk price, $10 kilo milk sales is great, which is about $1 a litre. But if you're buying milk at the supermarket, you see that it's double or triple that. And so by selling directly to customers, we can get the actual value of the product.
So that's 10%, and the other 90%, is that just?
So we're Frontier Supply. We're Frontier Supply Farm. Have been for the last 40 years since we've been doing this commercially. And more recently we're doing this on the side, a small amount, which we could develop if we were willing to deliver, but the cost of the milk would go up a lot, and also the footprint of actually doing it. So it works well for us to do it this way.
So when you get people that come in that haven't had any sort of farming experience or background, is that your job to sort of show them the ropes, or, because I imagine people want to be involved, but they don't really know what they're up to, right? Initially, at least anyway. So I imagine, you got to bring them up to speed somehow. Do you find their kind of skill set and deploy them accordingly?
Sure. That's sort of my job. We have apprentices, for example. We go through their AGITO apprenticeship program with young people who want to come in and work on the farm. Not that we have many positions, like occasionally a position will come up and we will employ someone. And it may not be from the community. Unfortunately, we are also an aging community in farming. That's pretty hard work, as I'm finding myself. So the younger generation, they're great to have, and I'm really happy to have them on the farm.
So what you're saying then is effectively that the offspring of your forebears, so to speak, of the community, are they choosing other paths in life effectively?
Well, it's hard to say. So I am, and as I said, third generation. I also have a brother who lives here, but I'm over 50, and so is he. So, and our offspring, I've got children who are 25 and 4. They're overseas studying or doing other things. They're at an age where it doesn't really appeal to them. Mostly it appeals to people to come here when they have children and they want to actually settle down with a family, because it's a great place for that. And that sort of gap we have between 18 and at school and me, and you maybe 30, is a bit of a gap at Riverside.
When it comes to the regenerative farming scenario that you've got going there, and organic and things like that, when it comes to actually testing, does it take a lot of the profit to make sure that everything's up to standard? And obviously you're supplying Fonterra, these sorts of things. Does that eat much of a chunk out of the profit?
Well, with the raw milk, it certainly does. And the raw milk we can do successfully, and I guess that's actually part of the reason why a lot of the raw milk we use in the top of the south no longer exist, is because of the requirements of the testing and the cost involved, which makes that milk then more expensive, and it's then hard to market. It's also very hard to market. Due to the sort of general perception and the anti-raw milk, I would say, with a bit of an anti-raw milk lobby. Of course, the retailers, the supermarkets don't want farmers selling their own milk. I mean, that cuts into their trade. But yeah, because we're also Fonterra supply, and a lot of that we're doing anyway, it's easy for us to also do the raw milk. We're not registered organic, so we don't have compliance costs there. We do it mainly for ourselves. Mainly the stuff that we do for ourselves, and as an extension, then is selling excess or more than what we need ourselves. So all our own vegetables, meat, and all that. So we do that. But maybe that can change in the future of micro abattoirs, and I'm interested in that. But mainly it's what the produce which we have for us, and then an extra, except for, of course, the dairy, which is milk, which we sell to Fonterra.
So tell me, in terms of the division of income, I don't know, if I'm looking at it, and let's say, for argument's sake, there's 20 people and the income gets divvied up 20 ways, for example, and then you get more people come in, but you might need more people, but to get the work done. Like, how does that break down? I imagine there's a lot of tension there, or am I completely wrong? Is everyone just accepting of it?
Well, there can be. I mean, at times there is. But you have to be accepting of it to live here. So basically that's what that first 2 years is for. Can you accept? Some people can work more and do work more. I do, for example. And some people can't because of whatever, health or ability or age or whatever else, or of whatever reason, and they will bring in less, but they're still, doing what they can. And that's basically the acceptance one has to achieve, is that people do what they can, and it's okay because they're not competing. As long as it's working for everyone.
Yes, that's the fascinating element of it, the non-competitive element, because as humans, we're very competitive. So that's a real cut against the grain, isn't it? I'm not saying it's undoable or not doable. You've clearly got a model that works for some people, but that is quite an interesting concept, isn't it? I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and I can just see how, resentment would come in any sort of given scenario where so-and-so's, doing a hell of a lot of stuff, and someone just by nature isn't quite as, go get 'em type of attitude. It's just the way people are, right? Everyone's different. And, I'm trying to get my little brain around it, Tristan. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And it requires a lot of personal growth. So to be here in this situation means you really got to look at why you're doing things. And for me, what helped was thinking, well, I get to choose. Like, I get to choose to work 5 days a week and, or 40 or 50 hours if I want to. And if I don't want to, then I can choose not to. I have to arrange it. There's not me and whatever I take on responsibility, but I get to choose to take on that responsibility and do what I do. And so I have to do it because I love doing it rather than because I want money.
Yeah, good point. Because philosophically, I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, clearly there's a massive socialist element to it, but also there's tremendous freedom in terms of, as you say, the choice thing, which is a very interesting concept when you try and marry those sort of two things together.
Yeah, there's definitely a socialist basis. So that has always been there. And we struggle to keep it. Like we always move to like more individualistic model. So giving up the income sharing. Well, we have the income sharing, but giving up the asset sharing, which we did, was a move to more personal. So it's like we have some people who have, of course, inherited money and they have different possibilities than other people who haven't had that. And they use them, and that's okay. We have to be okay about that and realize, okay, they can go traveling and I can't. Okay. But we're trying to keep a legal playing field while we're living here together. So we don't get this disparity of rich and poor, and which leads to all sorts of social problems, including crime and violence. And in the end, war, because if you don't have any choice and don't get anything, then anything is taken. That happens a lot. I see it in the world at large, not so much in New Zealand, but also New Zealand. And we're trying to offer in a way a model, an example of a model which is different. They're saying, well, this could work in a different way. Not saying it's better, and definitely not easier, but it can work in a more model where it's less competitive and more sharing. And yeah, to marry those things together, it takes a lot of time. And I think being the third generation, I mean, to put it that, I didn't always live here. I spent 13 years in Germany. I studied and got married and had children in Germany. I was a lecturer in car park engineering. Had a university in Germany for a while after I finished with that stuff. Before I came back here, but I decided when my children were 7 and 9 years old to return here to my roots, just for that freedom and for that, actually for being able to live here, it's just a piece of paradise. Like, there's this 200 hectares of land here in Motueka Valley. Is a place it is amazing, really, because all the trees and everything's grown over 40, 50 years, so it's all mature and the land's been cared for, and it's quite a unique place.
It sounds it in terms of a piece of paradise as you describe it. It's interesting though. I think things like regenerative farming, organics, things like that. I was just speaking with someone a couple of weeks ago from Fonterra, and they were talking about the fact that they're looking for more organic milk supply. For example, I think regenerative isn't as scary as it was a few years ago to people, and these things seem to be much more, I wouldn't say in the mainstream, but they're certainly not as fringe as they were a few years ago. You'd probably have noticed some sort of a slight sort of sea change there a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I so welcome that. And it's in South Van, which they're doing that. I mean, I'd love to be able to supply organic milk here. That would be fantastic. Yeah. And then, of course, we'd go down the path to get accredited, and that would be great. We don't have that here yet, but yes, I do notice that definitely, and there's a growing trend of this not only in New Zealand, that's coming from our export requirements, and people want that overseas. The customers want that, the big ones especially, and so we're getting that fed back to us, and I think that's definitely a positive thing. And something New Zealand is sort of like made for it, can benefit from that hugely.
Yeah, I think so. Certainly to a point, at least anyway. The weather scenarios that are happening at the moment, and I think we've already seen as many sort of adverse events in the first part of this year than we saw for all of last year, notwithstanding, of course, the flooding that occurred around your area, I think, last year. I can't quite was it around the middle of the year, potentially? Was there any effect on the farm through to those adverse weather events?
Oh, absolutely. So we got flooded twice, 2 weeks apart, and they were the biggest floods in my area. So the total area of the farm, which is between two rivers, between the original river, the Motueka River, and a drainage river, which was dug in the 40s, 50s. Between those two rivers is dairy flats, and that was totally underwater, including a dairy shed. We only had one little strip on one of the laneways where the cows were on dry could stand by during those flood events. And it happened twice, like within 2 weeks. And it hadn't happened for 50 years. I mean, it hasn't happened since I remember at all. I remember having floods, but nothing as big as that. And yeah, but having it twice in a row that shook us quite a lot. The damage was not enormous. Mainly it was just the fences, because they caught all the drifting debris that got in the fences, and then the fences got wrecked. Other damage. The rain, the water went away again, so it rained pretty quick. So it was within 12 hours, it was gone again, and then we could clean up the house again. But that was quite shocking. Yeah. And since then, it's been a very unsettled year. I mean, even still now, we're having major storms all over the place. It's not obviously just in our area. So we have, interesting times. I think it's just it's going to be just more and more unsettled. The weather, I mean, not predictable. Like, it's just so out of norm. So even, I'm always looking at the weather, what the weather's going to do, and most of the time it seems to be what they forecast is wrong. And changes so much that it's just wrong.
Go to Weather Watch. My good mate Phil Duncan, he'll sort you out. Hey, listen, couple of quick things to finish up on. So, how is the community currently viewed? Your community viewed by the wider community?
Well, mainly very positively. Like we're actually a beacon of, look, how you can do if you really want to. Actually, I would say I've heard a beacon of hope. A lot of people say it's a beacon of hope to be able to live in a way which is more aligned to more aligned to your own integrity. So if I want to change something, I mean, then it's up to me. So there's a lot of responsibility, like taking responsibility of where you want to, the choices you want to make, because we do in this scenario have the choice. As a group.
Yeah, and, I like that. Yeah.
And so, I think it's a very positive thing. And there's a lot of positive energy here, and people come, and especially to the cafe, and the groups of people come through. We do an education program with hundreds of people coming through a year, different education courses which we offer. I think what used to be the church is now a cultural center, and we offer, for example, we always have lunches, which everyone's welcome to come. It's just a couple-hour basis. It's on a Wednesday. Anyone's interested, turn up on a Wednesday we do so much.
Nice. Yeah, that sounds cool. And just lastly, tourism. Do you have tourists coming by, seeing what's happening, or?
Yeah, well, we have a hostel, which caters for travelers who want to come and stay. And tourism as a business, we don't run a tourism business, but this is a very tourist centered area. A lot of people come through. We offer accommodation for people who want to come through for that.
Great, and a fresh glass of milk as well at the.
Absolutely.
Yeah, good. I love it. Riverside.org.nz. If you want to see more online, listeners, that's where you can go to. The Riverside Community Farm. Bloody fascinating, Tristan. Thank you for sharing it, the story with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dom.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Don't forget new episodes every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday of the Rex Daily Podcast. And, of course, as always, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.